nerds, and welcome. I'm Ryan. I'm joined by my wonderful co-hosts James, Eric, and Clark, and you are listening to Crossing the Nerdverse, this fun little ride that we take through parallel dimensions that we call fandoms. We got a pretty excited lineup tonight. We're going to be talking about fan fiction, the universes, the socials of it, where it came from, early examples, the whole nine yards. And I, for one, am very, very excited about it. There was a lot of this that I did not know before researching for this episode. But before we get going, we did have some comments from YouTube and TikTok that Eric wanted to share with us. Eric.
So I'm gonna say this probably wrong. Leaf the squirrel said it would have been cool as post-credit scene to have a claptrap roll up and say, "See you in Borderlands 4," boom, and the logo for Borderlands 4. Because we were talking about how the movie came out kind of like coinciding with the game.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that it actually would have been kind of cool if they would have made the game lead into, or made the movie lead into the game.
Well, did you see the news report that after the movie they had their highest concurrent player on Borderlands 3 for like the past, I think, like year or something like that? So like the movie did its job and like it got people back into the game. So that was kind of nifty to see that even though the movie was critically not acclaimed, it still did its job, because I'm a big fan of the Borderlands franchise, but I don't disagree where it's just like you could have had a tie-in or something at like an end credit.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I still personally haven't got to see the movie. In fact, the last time I was trying to talk about it, I was trying to talk about Fallout and Borderlands at the same time, which was frustrating. But I'm a huge fan of the Borderlands franchise. I think they've done an amazing job with storytelling, and I think they really revolutionized the cell shading style of art that we see in the animation now all over the place. And so I'm glad that the movie had some effect on that, because I think the games are worth it. But I've heard the movie was very, very bad.
I shan't be paying money to see the movie. I will watch it for free.
And then Matt Kenneth Richard Styles. When we were talking about anime-based games, he brought up Xenoverse 2 and Shinobi Strikers.
Okay.
I played
solid.
Xenoverse.
I
Good.
don't know.
No clue about Shinobi Strikers.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, that one eludes me as well. I have played Xenoverse. I think that one's storytelling is interesting with the whole like mind swapping psycho-sociopath thing. But yeah, I don't know about Shinobi Strikers.
Oh,
Yeah,
it just looks like a Naruto game
Oh, cool.
from Bandai Namco. I do love that company's name.
Bandai Namco.
I don't know why.
Did
makes me happy to
that
say.
used to be two separate ones, wasn't it, at one point?
Maybe.
For some reason I feel like it was, because I feel like Bandai made Power Rangers, the original games.
They might
I
have
actually
a
don't
sub.
know about that.
They might have a sub production company called Bandai.
And then
Well,
Namco made a lot of fighters.
Bandai Namco is just a fun name.
We are having a lot of success with video games turned into other media, especially following Marvel's Infinity War saga kind of movies, right? And so we're seeing a lot of, Last of Us on, I believe it was HBO, had a really great adaptation. And there was a comment a few days ago when they released the Minecraft movie trailer.
Oh, the trailer just dropped. Yeah.
Now
It's
here's
either
the
going to
thing.
be so wonderful or just trash.
I mean,
Absolutely.
If you think about the audience for who they made that, I think it's going to be great because it's for kids.
Yeah.
It's for kids and young teens, right? Like, and it looks like the trailer looks like it's for kids and young teens. So if you're an adult and you're mad about the trailer, you're kind of a weirdo. Let's be honest.
Well, and here's my thing. I saw it, and I saw Jason Momoa, and I saw Jack Black, and I said sold. Like, that was it for me. It's like, cool, I'm excited about this. And then everybody else was talking about it in these really terrible tones, including a comment that I saw that said, maybe I judged you too harshly, and it was looking at Borderlands after the Minecraft trailer drop. And so, yeah, that'll be interesting. Looking forward to that one. We do have a lot of stuff coming down the pipe in regards to movies, television, and video games, but that's going to be in a different episode. So let's go ahead and get into tonight's topic, fan fiction. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys, this topic came to me through one of our listeners, and she is very deeply into, I guess, the whole like culture of fan fiction, the society of it, to the point where she has had several of her stories be very popular and become very acclaimed amongst her peers. And it kind of was where I dipped my toe into the world. Like I always kind of knew what it was, right? It's fan fiction. All right, cool. Somebody out there is writing stories about existing universes and posting them on the internet. But that was kind of where my understanding landed. Do any of you guys have any like familiarity with fan fiction universe? Any of y'all write any fanfic?
No, I never wrote any. I mean, I've read some because of just being a fan of, like, especially Star Wars and stuff like that. A lot of people wrote random fan fiction of what they thought should have happened. But I've never really gotten too much into it because I barely read like main storylines for things. So getting into fan fiction can be kind of difficult.
Yeah, say like I'm not a writer, but I do know a fair amount about the fan fiction community, just because, or maybe not the community, but like things that have happened, because I think some of them are pretty interesting.
And I do like the idea of what the community does after I've done a little bit of skimming over the surface, because we've all encountered something that either didn't end like we liked it, or they didn't cover a side story that we thought was very engaging, or maybe just that we developed our own headcanon for something that happened in universe entirely unrelated to the movie or television show or video game at large. And I know it has a reputation, I guess let's get that out of the way first. It has a reputation of being kind of a smut corner, right? Looks at Clark as our resident smut reader.
No, why would you? No.
But yeah, it's kind of got a reputation for that and for being for that purpose. But it didn't take very long for me to start digging into this to realize that's actually only a very small kind of corner of
I think
what
it's
they
just
do.
the loudest corner.
It's the one that catches the
Well,
most attention, right?
Yeah, and I mean, we in the smut corner community have very large ones, like, 50 Shades of Grey is in all technicality a fan fiction from Twilight. So it's like that was widely publicized and started the era.
Yeah, that was actually something that only came to my attention earlier this year, where it was a like a Raylo kind of like Ray and Kylo Ren fan fiction. Which I
there's
think is
that too.
interesting. Like it's seeing something like that get modified and then go directly into the public eye. So let's go ahead and before we get into it, I guess let's get everybody's opinion on what's the qualifiers, right? Where does it become fan fiction, and when is it just writing?
I would say it either takes place in an existing universe or it takes the base storyline and just kind of alters it. Like, so a lot of the Harry Potter fan fictions are kind of like, what if Malfoy was the love interest? Ooh. So it's like in that world, but then when you look at, 50 Shades of Grey will be my big example. It's more she based the characters' personalities off of certain characters it's like she took that story and used it to jumpstart her own story instead of saying like, oh, this was an original thought of mine. I think to me that's where it becomes like fanfic, but to me the 50 Shades of Grey one, to me that's like a very muddy one. It's a little bit more clean cut when it's like in an existing world and you're using those exact characters. But that's just kind of like my personal take on how I divide my fan fiction.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like almost, I mean, completely. Like anytime you're using an IP that exists, you're writing fan fiction, right? Like if you are using the characters or the setting, you're writing fan fiction. And then yeah, like the 50 Shades of Grey is, like you said, very muddy because it's based off of these characters or their personalities and their interactions, but it's not them and it's not in that world. I guess it could be, I don't know, but not like not explicitly, right? So, is it really fan
No.
fiction? I mean, it's said that it is, but
Just calling out that you've never read 50 Shades of Grey because you know there's no werewolves or vampires in it.
hey, are you for sure that there's no werewolves or vampires in it? All right,
I'll be
do they
honest,
explore
true.
the
I'm
whole
not.
world?
Yeah.
Fair.
That's what I'm saying.
He
I actually
didn't look in the sewers.
I actually have read about 50 or so pages of 50 Shades of Grey.
That's all you need.
Well, and I was kind of in a similar position, right, to both of your opinions. And I agree with kind of, I hate to say this, but like the Wikipedia section of it describes it specifically as fiction written in an amateur capacity by fans as a form of fan labor that is unauthorized by but based on an existing work of fiction.
Pretty
And,
broad sweep, but yeah, it's not wrong.
yeah, well, and this is where I learned something new just as I was opening this up. Because when you open up the Wikipedia page for fan fiction, it gives kind of a clinical breakdown of what it is and how it interacts with copyright laws and fair use and that kind of stuff. And then it has a picture of the New Adventures of Alice, which is essentially fan fiction written in 1917 based on Alice in Wonderland. And they call it a pastiche. And here's where things got interesting for me, because a pastiche, if I'm saying that right, is defined as a work of visual art, literature, theater, music, or architecture that imitates the style or character of the work of one or more other artists. And that
That seems
opens
super complicated.
a wild umbrella to me, because it's not a parody, right? Because I mean, Weird Al is not writing fan fiction for all of these songs, but
Touche.
that's a major umbrella. And if we define, and I know I do, if we define literature as art, then that kind of opens a whole can of worms in regards to, artists that sell prints or, do fan art online or create music based off stuff. I was on TikTok today, and I see Travis is in our chat. Glad he could join us for a little bit. But I sent Travis a song today that was recorded for TikTok. I'm not sure about the band. I don't know what's going on with it, but it was an absolute jam about the orcs in the Warhammer 40K universe. It was awesome. And that band has a whole host of songs based on the 40K universe that I swear I'm going to mix into a playlist, because they cover the Blood Angels, they cover the Adeptus Mechanicum, they cover the orcs, like everybody. And they are all awesome in this really classic kind of dirty rock genre, and that makes me wonder if that's fan fiction.
I think that's fan art. I think to me fan fiction means it's a written, well, in my brain, fan fiction, if somebody told me that, it's a written work of art. If you said fan art, now I think you get into everything that I see at like the anime conventions where it's, Gojo in 50 different art styles, or kind of like those more one-off items. But to me, fan fiction resides in written art form.
So fan fiction is
That
fan
could be
art.
that could be
but
yes, it's fan art, but it's like a specific branch of it.
I think
That
not all
could be
fingers or
wrong.
thumbs.
It's just my vibe. Yeah.
I think you could expand it a little bit to include anything that tells more of like a story rather than just like a snapshot of something or just
Okay.
using something, right? Like fan fiction implies some kind of fiction, right? Some kind of storytelling in that
Mhm.
rather than just like, hey, here's a picture that I made.
Yeah, I guess I could take like if it was like a fan done edition, like My Hero Academia has a ton of fan fiction, and they just redo the manga in their own way. So like that to me would be considered
I
fan
get behind
fiction.
that. You have a really popular IP out there, and somebody makes a 10-minute animation on YouTube about it, telling a different story. Fan fiction.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic.
Whereas
All right.
that's like fan art, metal gnomes. I don't know. Every time I hear stuff like that, I think of the little gnome band where they're like, dig a hole, and I really like that little metal band.
Well, I know that there are a lot of excellent stories out there that got so much popularity amongst the community that even people that are not part of the fan fiction universe end up hearing about them. and sometimes, for good or for ill, as it were, right? Because as we said earlier, there's a particular corner of this nerdverse that is kind of loud and very popular.
Very
And
true.
yeah. As far as the history of it goes, I was trying to figure out when it kind of popped up and when it started becoming popular and in that kind of thing. And I never could find a real start. Like I said, all the way back to 1614, where I'm not going to be able to say this name, Alonso Ferdinand de Avellaneda wrote a sequel to Cervantes' Don Quixote.
Sounds like a
And
tennis player.
yeah, he even had it published as a second volume on his own, and it was entirely unauthorized. It was entirely nothing. He just wrote a sequel to Don Quixote, and so this has just been something that's a nerdverse for a long, long time.
What I
And
think is interesting is with anything like this, like we're talking about with the fan, what do we think of like comic books and things that get done? Like Firefly had a lot done, but not by the original people, but
ooh, interesting.
other people done into like books and comic books.
I
Well,
think it goes
Just
back to like fan fiction is usually, I'll say, amateur writing,
at the very
but
least, unauthorized, right?
yeah.
So that's actually,
yeah,
that
this
poses
stuff
an
is definitely
interesting point,
authorized.
because it's authorized now. And so at what point did somebody see an artist on Pinterest or Instagram or whatever and be like, actually, this person's really kicking ass. I want them to do the comic book, and you get to watch your fan fiction become canon events.
I think
Yeah,
as soon as the IP reaches out to you and you're under contract with the IP, then it's just IP expansion and no longer fan fiction.
There you go.
There's an interesting edge case I kind of have. So everybody's familiar with the three-body problem, yes? So
I am.
at least know about it if you haven't read it or seen it or whatever. Was
All
three
right,
books, the
Eric.
trilogy.
Yeah.
But
There's three bodies. Hear me out.
there's a fourth book that was written by a fan, but the author said, "Yeah, that's canon." Like the author of the original trilogy
Oh,
said,
interesting.
"Yeah, that's canon."
So it's not authorized by the holding company or the publishing house, but the author went sold.
Mm-hmm.
That is super
That's
cool.
awesome.
I would be
So,
wicked proud of that work.
well,
Huh.
so you're
Yeah,
like,
it's,
that's
I
again
mean,
like Muddy Waters. Is that
Yeah,
fan
it's
fiction?
muddy.
I mean, it certainly started as fan fiction.
It started as fan fiction,
But
and
now
then I
it's
think it just became canon. Because my understanding is fan fiction is blah, 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 typically never canonized. Is
okay,
it's just
typically, but does
yeah,
that
it's just
exclude
like
everything that's canonized from being fan fiction?
I think it transitions it. It goes from being fan fiction to canon because then it's no longer my interpretation of the story. Now it's the true interpretation of the story. Because fan
See,
fiction to me is like my it's my I wanted Malfoy to be the love interest, but J.K. Rowling's never J.K. Rowling, right? No.
yeah,
Yes. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
I'm like my
I
brain
don't know
is
authors.
my
well,
brain is fizzled out, but she's never going to be like, "Yeah, no, that was right. You got it right, my little friend." So
see,
it's never going to be canon.
and I think that's an interesting distinction, because for me, when I hear that, it immediately makes me think that, I mean, AU or alternate universe stuff, like Malfoy being the love interest all along, that hits a murkier spot because we already have existing canon, right? But when you're adding to the canon, such as this fourth book for Three Body Problem, I think the line where it transitions from being fan fiction that becomes canon and just becomes an extension of the universe is how much, I guess, authorization you have to get. Like, if I write this book and I have to really, really hope that the author or whoever holds the IP says, "Yep, that's solid. You get the stamp of canon event." Then cool. That's still fan fiction up to the point where it's added to the universe. And even then, it would still be fan fiction if you took the name literally, right? It was fan labor fiction. But if you're in a position where you get to add to the universe without an oversight to that degree, that's when you're just writing for the universe, right?
Yeah, because you have those what if series where, like, even in the multiverse, when you look at like the comics, where one will be like, well, what if Spider-Man was a zombie? Like, they have authorization to write into that universe and make canon, instead of them just being like, here's my zombie Spider-Man comic. I hope you guys think it's cool. Don't know why I did that voice.
Actually,
So one thing, Travis brought this up, and you all will understand this better than me. He called it Schrodinger's fiction.
Yeah.
It's both canon and not at the same time.
So actually, that in regards to the comics, especially like the What If comics, those aren't canon.
Yeah, they're not canon.
They're what ifs. They are things that are not canon. Other, like the Marvel Zombies became canon in a very weird time travel-y, timey-wimey fucking weird way. It's very complex.
Yeah,
so I picked the one that did become canon perfect.
Like, there's a lot of what if stories.
Yeah,
and
but it's
most
like
of them
you were
are not
given
canon.
Permission to write under that. So it's like, is that considered fan fiction then?
See, and that's really interesting. So let me pose an example. I have two examples actually. So a number of years ago, there was an open call for authors at the Black Library, which is, I don't know, the publishing house, the holding company for literature based in the 40K universe. And I can't believe I'm coming back again with two different examples. And so I submitted a story written for that I lost entire command of, right? Like, it's their story now. They didn't end up choosing my story, but I wrote a complex story based off of the night houses and a freelance knight in the 40K universe. And they never published it, they never used it, but now they own it. So is that still fan fiction?
Yes, it is, because it was never used. So they
At
probably have
least to
a
my
lot of
knowledge.
fan fiction that was done. Right. And
so then it's not fan fiction once it's used?
So, all right, I'll say for me, fan fiction is anything that doesn't actually get published and doesn't get recognized.
Oh, interesting.
Just because at that point, if they published it, even if it's not canon, like Star Wars, we don't call Legends fan fiction.
Yeah.
It might not be canon anymore, but we don't refer to it as fan. So basically, if it's published by the same company that does whatever the main topic is, I would say it's not fan fiction at that point. Now, if you get it published by like a third party, or nowadays you can publish your own shit on Amazon, that's different. Because one, you're probably legally not allowed to publish it.
Yeah.
I'd say
at some point that's going to catch up with you.
The words cease and desist come to mind.
Published by whoever owns the license to that IP.
Yeah, so like that's where I come in. Even if it's like the what ifs and different things Star Wars has done too, like where they do those little short stories and stuff, like it probably all started out as like some fan stuff, like somebody's writing a story, and then Disney just kind of ran with it.
So as soon as the IP gets a hold of it, it's no longer fan fiction in your mind.
Yeah, because then it's like broad and like everybody's, like then it's huge. It's not just a website where you're writing a blog about, I don't know, whatever your fan fiction preference is.
Deadpool dating Punisher.
Yeah. On the subject of, I want to take a minute here.
I could see that.
Naruto and Sasuke.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take a minute here.
I would say Gojo and Geto, but that was actually canonized.
So, Eric, the following is for your TikTok kind of clip accounts as you do your editing, right? So first off, I want to do a shout out to Sir Superhero, who brought this story to my attention. And in regards to fan fiction and the topic that we've had tonight, one of the instances of interesting, I guess it's not technically fan fiction according to the guidelines that we've been talking about, but the story of Lectron is one of the most criminally underpublished, underused, and underrated stories in the Marvel Universe. And I cannot believe they have not given that character the respect that he deserves.
What's the name?
Lectron.
I don't know that one. You got me beat.
Yeah. Go to Sir Superhero's TikTok, check out his section on Lectron. You'll understand. So big shout out to Sir Superhero. But in any case, another detail that I wanted to bring up about fan fiction So, in regards to fan fiction, there's always been a few IPs that really are the leading head of like everything belongs there. We've already talked about Star Wars. We've talked about Harry Potter. There's also a whole lot of fan fiction for smaller IPs like My Little Pony. But one of the biggest IPs for fan fiction since the 1960s has been Star Trek. And I read that. I was not surprised. There's an article talking about it in a fanzine that came out in 1967 called Spockanalia. But the statistics in that caught my attention. As of 1970, it was discovered that 83% of Star Trek fan fiction authors were female. And by 1973, 90% of Star Trek fan fiction was written by females.
I mean, you got Captain Kirk. Just
I mean, what are you going to do, right?
what I'm saying. Actually, I feel maybe it could just be my corner of the fan fiction universe, but I feel like most of the fan fiction writers I know are female.
So I was actually about to bring that up. Every fan fiction author I've ever talked to has been female. I've never written fan fiction beyond the examples that I gave you. I've written stories and I've written homages and I've run D&D games that were set in IP universes. So I guess that stretches the boundaries, but it's almost fan fiction. But I've never actually, gotten online and submitted stories to peer review that I've written in these universes. I find that absolutely fascinating. So here we are. This article is from 1970, so you're talking 54 years later, and it still seems to be dominated by women.
I find this to be possibly an interesting statistic because there's plenty of sites like that are your fan fiction sites like AO3 and What App or whatever it's called. How do you know what the gender of that person is unless they self-report?
Right. How would they find that out?
You're taking a guess. You're extrapolating based on some data points that they have. I would hazard a guess that probably most are female, but there's no way to know that for sure. I would say.
Interesting.
Ooh.
I think, how about this? At least currently, a majority of the identified ones are female, and I know that's confirmation bias, I think.
Yeah.
My mathy friend down there in my corner. Just making sure I remember my biases. So it could be real. It could just be, also they could be under pen names that appear female, but like most of the ones that I can think of are female.
Wouldn't it be really kind of weird? Like, I know this is going to sound super sexist, but it's coming from me.
I'm so excited.
Right? So, I mean, realistically, wouldn't it be kind of weird for, like, not weird, but wouldn't it be looked upon differently if a guy was writing a lot of the, like, smutty fan fiction?
Yeah, but that's just
compared
my
to, like, when the ladies
fan
do
fiction.
So here's the thing.
There's other fan fiction. I hear there's non-smut fan fiction. I don't know why you read it, but I hear it's real.
Well, I don't know why you would, like, to be totally honest, I don't know why you would either, because that's the good stuff. And people put a lot of time into it.
But see, that's an extremely antiquated point of view that comes up and it still is really heavy in the author world. Like, it is an ongoing joke and something of a bit of sandpaper in my shoes, because not only does it seem to the majority of the population that it's inappropriate for men to write romantic scenes or romantic stories, but that when they try, they're really bad at it. And there is a host of examples, like there really is, about authors that were very, very bad at trying to describe and capture the feelings that are involved in a romance story.
Yeah.
The phrase bounces down the stairs boobily comes to mind.
She breastedly walked down the stairs.
And the frustrating part to me, especially as a male author, is that it sets a bad precedent to where now if I wanted to write a romance story, it's not going to be as easily or as widely accepted. Now, if I wrote under a female pen name, it's going to be the opposite story. And I realize this is an age-old problem, right? We're dealing with hundreds of years of tradition where it's flopped one way to the other. And I hate the fact that the male authors that did do such a terrible job at describing these scenes get overshadowed by female authors that did just as badly, but they don't get any of the, like, spray. Does that make sense? They don't get any of the bad press.
I think
And
so. I think that the thing that you're missing is that the consumers of romance novels are skewed towards women by like a lot.
What?
So
True,
women
it's the
are
target
going to
audience.
write better stories for women, right? Like they are going to
Yes.
write that romance from the perspective of a woman, whereas like a male author, even if it's not necessarily bad, it's probably not what like most women are looking for.
And I will say, I have read some really garbage romance novels that have been written by women. Wicked as They Come is. I
Well,
finished that book for the meme.
well,
Like, oh
one
my
sec.
goodness, please don't read that book.
Uh-oh.
Okay, but one sec, real quick. So someone brought this up in chat. I didn't know this. Roaming Crow said Nicholas Sparks is a very commercially famous author that does the romancy stuff.
That's
And
actually
I thought
a
he was
super
just a
valid
director.
point.
I didn't realize he was a writer. Not educated.
Oh, well done, Eric. So here's the point. Here's
That's
the
why
thing.
I'm here.
A very close friend of mine that we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. We're actually involved in a collaborative project right now, and there's an author that comes up constantly that I think is very, very relevant, and I believe it's Chris Tingle.
Oh,
Let me check real quick.
I think that is really his name. It is terrible. That is terrible writing. The books are terrible.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Chris Tingle is
I hate that name so much.
wildly
He's good.
famous for having some
Infamous.
of
I would use the word
the
infamous.
the most bizarre, not even romance books. They're just smut. They're just
Erotica.
erotica.
Excuse me as I Google.
So,
Not good erotica.
for example,
Oh no.
2015, Chris Tingle presents scary stories to tingle your butt.
Yes.
2019, Not Pounded by Anything. 2016, Space Raptor Butt Trilogy.
So
Yeah.
good.
You were selling me on these names because I also love the movie Velocipaster. So, like,
solid movie though.
but-
Solid movie.
Here's what I've found out. Now, it's Chuck Tingle, not Chris Tingle.
Yeah, Chuck Tingle.
It's Chuck Tingle.
oh, that
Either
makes
way.
it better.
Yeah, that fixes it, right? His name is Charles Tingle. Anyway, so Chuck
Tingle.
Tingle
It's
will
Tingle.
will defend these novels. He thinks they should be taken seriously and has vocalized that a lot. But here's what I just learned not even 2 weeks ago, is that he also has works out there that are very serious novels that are extremely well written and show serious talent. And I cannot imagine, under any circumstances, titling one of my books Pounded by President Bigfoot.
I mean, you
And
know
yet
what
here
you're
we
getting.
are.
Oh, just so we all know, I guess Chuck Tingle was a Hugo Award nominee.
Yep,
He
that
was
is
nominated.
a fact. So yeah, he writes, I'm going to call it niche gay erotica, and is an extraordinarily talented writer, is award-winning, and has a plethora of books that have come out rapid fire and very much pleased their target audiences.
Ooh.
And
Am I the target audience?
and I guess we've kind of gotten a little bit off track over the topic
I was
of
like, are those fan
fan
fiction
fiction.
and of what?
But so
Well, I mean, fan fiction and it's weird to say, but fan fiction and kind of the smut do kind of go together. Because I think, like, when I first heard about fan fiction, a lot of what I heard about was like two of the characters getting together, and things like that. Like, I didn't hear about stories like, oh, this adventure happened, or like,
Yeah,
this
it's
awesome
usually-
thing happened. It's generally I always heard it was like two main characters got together, or like this main character and this other
that's
one,
what-
and things like
that's
that.
what we were talking about at the beginning. Is it?
Yeah.
The entire fan fiction community as a nerdverse is famous, popularly known anyway as a shipping romance kind of corner. There's an epic amount of fan fiction out there that is very romance oriented and that deals with established universes. Supernatural is one that I am in conversation about a lot on some of the fan fictions come out for that. And I will say that I went and I checked out some of the supernatural fan fiction. Now, yes, there's a bunch of it that is just people hooking up and whatever, like more power to you. People went through some serious effort to write that. That's what they wanted. Hats off to you. But there's also some fantastic in-universe stories that are not canon. They're just fan fiction that are about hunts and complications and are full-length novel sized. And doing a 150 or 200,000 word novel is not an easy thing. These labors are wild when I look at it. And so I think that it's really kind of a bummer that the entire community is seen as like, oh, they're just erotica smut
horn dogs.
smash ups. Yeah, a bunch of horn dogs, right? Because that's not the case. The loud ones are, but
yeah, I mean, when you see what they're reading,
She said.
I think to your point, you made a point like the larger ones are like they are works. I personally, never having done it, once again, no experience. This is just based on blind vibes. I think it would be easier for me to take an existing story and then just rewrite the coupling that happens than it would be for me to create my own creative existence in this story. So it might just be these smut romance ones are just easier concepts to be like, okay, Zorro and Robin are now together and they do the same exact thing in the same exact story. They're just now in a relationship in the One Piece universe. Or, instead of creating your own character within One Piece and also having a side adventure where you have to create an entire story that then links back into canon. Like, that to me seems way harder.
Zoro would definitely get with that vampire. What was his name? Hawk or something?
Mihawk?
Yeah, that's who. That would be. They would be the A+ relationship to that whole show.
I could get behind that relationship.
I don't ship them. If I had to ship Zorro, it would be with Robin.
So
I think.
Oh, sorry, Bones.
I think on her, like I said, like it is a lot easier probably to write that story, and I think that those romance stories are going to be like 99% of the time a lot shorter. And so, of course, they're going to be more prevalent just because they can be cranked out like a lot easier. People can just write a lot more of them. It's a lot more approachable from just a regular person. Maybe I've not written a lot of things, so I want to try writing this like quick little hookup story. That's so much easier than trying to, like you said, crank out a 200,000 word fan fiction novel. So, of course, those are going to be the minority of fan fiction.
Well, and one of the niche areas of fan fiction that I think is my personal favorite within the communities online are the, I don't know what to call them, plot hole fan theory. They're fan theory fan fiction, where the story itself writes about a certain area of the narrative that was not explored in the main media that could explain X, Y, and Z, and it's a story about that. And I think that's really, really cool.
How Palpatine returned? Fan fiction.
As an example. So there was one, I just got a text about it actually, that was Sheriff Donna from Supernatural Universe was in witness protection. And I would read that story in a heartbeat. I think that would be super cool to explain a lot of the character's motivation and motility. And I think that's a really cool. So before we move on, I do want to cover a little bit of this. So we've talked about E.L. James and 50 Shades of Grey, which was originally written as a fan fiction for Twilight, which I guess the practice of that is known as pulling to publish, changing characters' names and that kind of thing. It's not one I was familiar with. Now, here's one that is very near and dear, close to my heart. I really hope she's listening to this particular episode. It seems like she might be, because I want to talk about a 2013 fan fiction by Anna Todd called After, about the boy band One Direction. So apparently, this particular fan fiction, if I understand it correctly, secured kind of an internet, or maybe grew into an internet meme about human trafficking and people getting sold to the band One Direction. And here's the best part. I thought that was hilarious as a story. It's like, oh, fan fiction turned into an internet meme that now everybody uses and that I personally have used since I learned about it. But now I'm reading this and it says, Anna Todd's 2013 fan fiction titled After was about the boy band One Direction, secured a book and a movie deal with renamed characters in 2014. And a movie adaptation of the same title was released April 12th of 2019. It has one story. That's the dream for me right now. As an author, if any of my stories got that kind of attention, I would be over the moon. And yet people want to treat fan fiction as this lesser art form, or this kind of like, oh, it's just for the weird folk over here. No, these are major motion pictures.
I think
I think that was a long time ago. I think now it's a lot more accepted. Like you see a lot more, like even when you go to Comic-Con, you see it a lot more like mainstream. Even the industry itself is recognizing it more. Like if you look, um, like Ninja Turtles, there's a couple artists that do covers for their comics that aren't like traditional. Like they're not like constantly doing it. They do like special covers and things like that. So you're getting a lot more of like fan involvement, and that stigma is slowly gone away. I'm like, I think I'm the oldest one here, but like I just say like that's why I look at fan art as smut, because when I was younger, that's mostly traditionally what it was, like Luke getting with Leia and things like that. Like that's what it originally was a lot of the time, because you didn't have the avenues that you have now to publish and do different things with it. So I do think now it is better. So if you like people keep pushing with it, like they'll get seen and they'll get more of those TV, books, movies, and things like that from their fan stuff, because companies like Disney, Marvel and stuff like that, they realize that there's plenty of amazing people out there writing these that just need to get found. So
A lot of times people also don't realize that that's where that story originated from. Like if I had never heard my friend talking about the 50 Shades of Grey, in my mind, I never would have been like, oh, this is based on Twilight. Like reading them? No, not a shot in hell. So I would never have known it was even a fanfic to begin with. If you change the names and change everything else, oh, it's generic boy band. Unless I'm sure the One Direction fans have like, oh, this is a tell. It's very obviously
Yeah, but you got to be on the
Harry.
inside to know that stuff, right? Like,
But yeah, like as a general person, I would have looked at that movie and just been like, oh, this is a generic movie of a boy band and human trafficking, because One Direction, I don't think ever did human trafficking, as
no,
far as I'm
obviously
aware.
not. But
So like, I don't think as an outsider I would have ever put two and two together and been like, oh, fanfiction. Nope.
I don't think so. So kind of going off of Eric's point there, it's not necessarily a new thing for fan fiction to be like actually popular. So there's an author, Marion Zimmer Bradley, who wrote this series of stories called "In the Dark Over Universe." It's like a sci-fi fantasy kind of thing. It was very popular. But when she was writing those books, and this is kind of like actually a kind of a big deal in the fan fiction universe, she had a zine where people would send her stories, and she was using those fan fiction stories to create an anthology series. But at some point, and I don't know if it was through this zine, and the details of this thing are kind of all muddied, but at some point, somebody sent her a story that was so much like a novel that she was writing that she had to scrap the novel and like throw away all of her work. And so she stopped doing that whole anthology thing. And that also, I think, kind of informed some of the later authors' like opinions on fan fiction. Because we have cases like Anne Rice was like very hard, like suing people, right, who were writing fan fiction.
oh yeah,
And I think that probably like was informed because that was like shortly after this, like she was around the same time as MCB. So yeah, I think that there was, it's always existed, and sometimes even it's been good. But yeah, maybe in like the 80s it fell off because of all of this, and now it's just like slightly coming back. I don't know, but
well, and it's interesting to see the companies and the IPs that have taken advantage of the fan fiction nerdverse, right? Because you have certain IP holders, like Anne Rice in your example, like Games Workshop and Citadel for the 40K stuff, that will come down hard. They come down with everything they got to shut your production down. This includes people that just do like simple lore videos that are talking about a story that's already written, get a lot of legal attention, especially nowadays. And then you have other companies that decide to just lean into it that will frequently buy stories or ideas from authors, or even hire authors to write in order to expand the universe. And I did find something interesting in regards to us talking about Zorro and Robin and all that a minute ago. I have no idea how to say this word, so any of our listeners that are fluent in Japanese, please correct me in the comments. But there was a trend in Japan in the 60s and 70s known as doujinshi, doujinshi, which was an independently published manga and novels that were published by doujin circles, with many being based on existing manga, anime, and video game franchises. Manga artists such as, what did I get myself into? Shotaro Ishinomori. I hope I got that right. And Fujiku Fujio formed doujin groups such as the New Manga Party, where this was just the way things were done. And they were fully publishing and selling, and there was a whole market community just based on this stuff that was very openly traded without many of the IP holders coming down with the weight of the law. And let me ask you guys this. Let's invert our thinking here on the subject of what counts as fan fiction. There is a lot of IP recently that is coming out that is now entering public domain. If the IP is in the public domain, does it still count as fan fiction?
When you say public domain, like I can go publicly buy it?
Well, more so that it belongs to the public at large, and you can't be sued for using it.
Yeah,
Like
Oh.
Mickey Mouse.
the Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey.
Yeah,
Is that fan
Blood and
fiction?
Honey.
Yeah.
Is it fan fiction? Like that's a whole thing, right? Great Gatsby entered the public domain, I think, last year, and is now a major component in the Gravity Falls Book of Bill universe expansion leading up to a new season of Gravity Falls in 2026.
I mean, so it would definitely be fan fiction at that point, because you don't need, like, anywhere you publish it is going to probably be on your own. Like the Blood and Honey with Winnie the Pooh, like it wasn't, Disney had
No major
nothing to
studio
do
or
with
anything
that.
either.
Yeah. So I think it would still be,
Or is it an homage at that point?
I don't know what that word means,
Oh.
but I'm going to guess like in honor of or something.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, pretty close. It's in honor of, you're using their stuff, and definitely like showing it. This belongs to them. This is their franchise.
But I love it so much I had to put it in
Yeah,
here.
I had to add.
I
like,
think an homage is only if they accept it, because I definitely don't think anyone that did original Winnie the Pooh stuff would be like, that was so, thank you for making that.
Speaking of
think
which,
that's coming out
the
of anyone.
Peter Pan one comes out on Halloween. So
oh, there you go.
And the
There's a-
sequel to
it's already out.
Blood and Honey is also coming too.
It's already out.
Is the
Is
sequel
it?
already
I didn't know
out?
it was already out.
It's better.
There you go.
It's not good, but it's better.
So, yeah, that's just an interesting idea where it's like, okay, given the parameters that we set earlier, like, what does public domain mean and how does it interfere with this kind of stuff? And I just think it's really interesting to look back and you see 1960s and 70s, it was just an open thing in Japan where this was a very acceptable way to create fiction and create art and novels and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I'm not gonna lie to you, and Roman Crow said it really, really well in our chat, where Anne Rice was the original boogeyman of fan fiction. Now she cooled out later in life. I just learned that. I didn't know she ever actually got calm about it. I thought that was just the way she did things. But I would be really, really terrified right now to do something that was too close to an existing IP that was worth too much money. Like, I don't want to do anything close to Marvel or that might rip Marvel off, right? I am not touching anything Disney owns with a 15-foot pole, like none of it. And so it's interesting to see, I guess, the different perspectives on how fan fiction can be treated.
So on this note of when it goes wrong, I was talking about this a little bit earlier with Eric. So there's this incident, and it's called the 227 event. So it happens in China. There's this actor, Xiao Zhang. He's like pretty famous. He's in this show called The Untamed, very popular, not just in China, but like like all over the world. It's very globally successful. And people, of course, are going to write fan fiction about things that are very popular and that they enjoy. It's also based off of a webcomic where the two main characters are in a relationship. They are both male, and so in the show you can't have like actual romance on TV like that in like especially like LGBTQs, like actual like physical romance, you know. So they have like a very homoerotic kind of undertones, like subtext in the show. They're soulmates, these two men, and people wrote fan fiction about that, putting the characters, you know, just straight up in. As far as I haven't read the actual story that this happened in, but I've heard, you know, they like put the character into like a looking like being like a feminized prostitute or something like that. So it's pretty crazy. It's definitely in the erotica side. But then the fans of this actor who played this character that was the fan fiction was about found this, and they like were like, hey, everybody go report this story. And eventually it was brought to the attention of the Chinese government, and they were like, well, you can't access this site anymore. They blocked the site. And then in reaction to that, you had all of these fans of fan fiction, all these people who were writing fan fiction, who now could not access the site. And so they were like, in retaliation, let's boycott this actor. Let's like, not even just boycott him. They were like sending him death threats online and stuff. It became like a huge thing on Weibo, which is like the Chinese Twitter essentially. Like they had to step in and like ban accounts because they were being so like vitriolic towards this guy who, let's be like, the actor himself had like nothing to do with any of this. Like he just played the character, right? But yeah, it was so great. Like they were boycotting all of this stuff, and then there was like, you know, threats from his fans to these people that were like leading these boycotts. And so it's just like a very kind of crazy story, just stemming from some guys like hobby writing or girls hobby writing of fan fiction.
Right. Well, and that's wild because so there's this ongoing kind of discussion right now, and this is going to approach some of our more sensitive content. But in regards to a lot of this, especially here in America, I very much take a stance on I can appreciate art and not appreciate the artist, right? Like Lovecraft is a really good example. I love reading his stories. I get a real good kick out of it. As a human being, he did not excel. And this comes up in my house and amongst my friends pretty frequently because I myself am a huge fan of Harry Potter. And so I'm going to bring up the J.K. Rowling kind of controversy for just very briefly. And I find myself in an interesting position because on the one hand, the way that social media and the internet treats a lot of this kind of news, it gets exaggerated and twisted and made out worse than it is a lot of the time. And so that was where I was at originally. And then when I started looking at some of the stuff that was actually said and done, it was like, okay, yeah, this is not the best, right? But I'm still a huge fan of Harry Potter. And I can't imagine what it would be like if we were in a position where if enough people got angry enough, we could have things shut down and banned and taken away and book burned. Like that seems like a terrible state of affairs. And so I decided to look up a little bit of interesting numbers here for our statistics leading listeners. So a 2020 study of Harry Potter fan fiction writers on Archive of Our Own found that the users, the users who were who disclosed their genders in their profiles, 50.4% were female or femme-leaning, and 13.4% were masculine or mask-leaning. 11% of users were transgendered, 21 identified as non-binary, gender fluid, or gender queer, and an additional 3.9% stated that they identified as agendered or genderless. Now, as we've already stated, the amount of Harry Potter fan fiction out there is incredible. And yes, a lot of it is kind of a shipping romance affair. A lot other is just stories. And to have somebody coming out and so very publicly taking an anti-LGBTQ stance when that's the most active fan base blows my mind. And so I can't imagine what it would be like to just be able to have stuff taken away if people were upset. Another interesting kind of deal. So we've talked about like the fact that a lot of fan fiction is very written by females and very female oriented. There was also a 2010 all the way through 2020 study that disclosed that was basically a study of where it was coming from. And overwhelmingly, the United States is in the lead, with 2010 study on fanfiction.net showing that 57% of all accounts originated in the United States. And that was only followed by the UK, Canada, and Australia. That was it. Now, a 2020 study of Archive of Our Own, or AO3, found that 59.7 was located in North America, with 16.1 in Great Britain, 10% in mainland Europe, 6.3 in Oceania, 2.8 in Scandinavia, 2.2 in Asia, 1.8 in South America and the Caribbean, and 0.2 in the Middle East. The study did not include profiles written in Chinese, Greek, Indonesian, Japanese, Korean, Polish, Russian, or Turkish.
That's I feel like a flawed study already.
Yeah, that's right. And so I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So there's a bunch of them that come out of North America. That's not surprising. We do a lot of internet shenanigans. And I'm reading through here, and I'm like, they're not talking about any of Asia at all.
Well, they bias it by only including English profiles. So
Yeah,
of course, the majority are going to be probably in America, maybe in the UK, right? Like
in the UK, yeah, like because we didn't include Chinese, Greek, Indonesian, Japanese, Korean, Polish, Russian, or Turkish, and it's like, so half the bloody world. Cool, rock on. But anyway, so in that regard, is there anything
Right.
that y'all? I'm sorry, go ahead.
So one thing I did want to do, like we talked a lot about fan fiction, like I did want to touch a couple other things real quick before we leave because there's some big things that have happened. So was there something else you wanted to talk about fan fiction?
I was just going to ask everybody's kind of closing ideas. Did anybody like learn anything interesting or new about the community and that kind of thing? I, for one, was unaware of what I was getting into, even being briefed by friends of mine that are very, very involved in the community. I didn't understand exactly what I was dipping my toe into when I started research for this episode. And the sheer amount of work out there, the volumes and volumes and volumes of work out there blows my mind. And there's some really incredible stories. And I think my main thing, the main thing that I learned is that there are so many incredible and talented authors that are just waiting for the shot, that I really hope that the companies that are involved in that, the publishing houses and similar fare, look at these websites when they're talent searching.
You can self-publish these days a little bit easier on Amazon.
Yeah, that is a fact.
But I mean, I know of fan fiction. I read it accidentally, apparently. But most of my experience is in fan art, and I really enjoy the fan art and like the fan spin-offs because I am not a creative person. So to like, there's one artist on Instagram that I absolutely love. They take anime figures and turn them into like real life Vogue covers, and oh my god, it's some of like the best art that like I have ever seen. I'm like, holy crap! I hope this happens. Something happens. Whatever your dream is, I hope for you because this is really cool to see. So I think it's a great way to showcase talent, especially in the art space, because yeah, coming up with an entirely new creative idea is super hard, but it doesn't mean you're not like artistically talented. It just could be my brain can't also think of a completely holistically new thing. Well, I'm not artistically talented either, but if I was, fan art would be where I would go.
Well, and I think that a large aspect of fan fiction that we didn't get a chance to cover that I want to put some attention on is that fan fiction is a unique creative space where authors and creators can go to explore niche interests or kind of find a new community amongst themselves. And so, for example, the ABO, also called an Omegaverse, is a speculative fiction area that originally was a subgenre of erotic / fan fiction. And it got a lot of people's attention on dominance hierarchy storytelling within humans. And that's an extraordinarily niche interest and fascination that now gets some attention. You can find your peers very easily through these fan fiction kind of networks. And
The manhwas in the Omegaverse are fantastic. Just a heads up.
I was unaware of what that even was until today. And I'm just kind of reading through the Wikipedia article, and in the first 3 paragraphs, I was just like, oh, no clue what I was stepping into. It was super interesting, and their willingness to explore topics that would normally be considered taboo, I think is fascinating, and definitely I might check out a little bit more. Bones, you got any closing thoughts?
No, I'm good.
Well,
it is definitely a fun place where you can find people who match your freak, so to speak. You're like, yeah, I also thought these people should have gotten together, or yeah, I thought this ending was way better. So it's fun to find those people.
Well, and I know me personally, doing the research for this episode, I find myself already significantly more willing and even encouraged to explore some of these websites like AO3, like fanfiction.net, and see what's out there, because I've been very, very surprised by the quality of content and the diversity of topic that I've seen within the Nerdverse itself. All right, Eric, you had some closing stuff before we wrap it up for the evening.
Yes, Call of Duty.
Okay, sure.
Beta's out, looks good. James had mentioned a lot more like new movement and stuff like that it's needed because a lot of other shooters have it. I didn't get a chance to get on it. I tried to get on it, but I'm not pre-ordering it. But some people sometimes on Twitter give out like codes and stuff like that. I unfortunately couldn't get my hands on one. I didn't watch too much of it. What kind of movement do they got, James, now you were talking about?
So they introduced like omnidirectional movement. So previously you could only like dive forward or slide forward. Now you can literally dive in any or slide in any direction when you're moving around, which is a pretty big deal for a shooter like that. So I think it'll make gameplay a lot more interesting. Like I said earlier when I was talking to you, I think it will also favor controller players a lot over mouse and keyboard.
Not with the new Razer. The new Razer keyboard allows you to do something omnidirectional that it's like pro players want it like banned from the space, where it's something to do with strafing, but I don't disagree with you. It'll probably, if you don't have that keyboard.
Yeah, generally speaking, it will favor controller players.
Except for that one person, man.
Well, usually when they play, I think they have to use, isn't it controller only for the league? The Call of Duty League? I thought it was controller only.
Yeah,
maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe.
I haven't watched in a while.
I think they standardize it. It's like if you're playing in a tournament, you're all playing on controller or you're all playing keyboard or whatever.
All right,
so that looks good, exciting. And then the other one was the new Star Wars game. I'm excited by it, but a lot of people have said if you're not a fan of Star Wars, you probably won't play it for the gameplay.
Yeah, I watched a lot of playthroughs of it, and the thing that I think that somebody said that sticks out to me is that it's a great game for Star Wars, but if you've played Assassin's Creed, you're not going to be, like, there's nothing that's going to be, like, wowing you about this game. Like, it's very kind of generic. But the Star Wars setting is phenomenal. The storytelling for Star Wars is great.
Yeah, we got it on Game Pass, but I'm not paying $70-some for base. When you can, I think it's Game Pass. Yeah. I'll just pay 1 month of Game Pass playthrough and then be done. But so far, my husband seems to like it.
Yeah, it's supposed, if you're a Star Wars fan, it's supposed to be amazing. Even the detail supposedly on the maps is a lot better than what they usually put out in like their other games. So they put a lot into it. So it looks good. I'm excited to try it at some point because I'm also going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pay for the pass for the month. So that way I can play it and beat it, and then if I enjoy it when it goes on sale, I'll buy it. But nothing to mean AAA title to me. I know some people are saying it, and it's kind of crazy. And the last thing to close us out, James, what's the name of the new singer for Linkin Park again?
Cannot remember her name. She's the lead singer of a band called Dead Sarah.
Needless to say, excited to see Linkin Park with another singer.
I'm excited to be a female singer. I think that'll be a really cool sound for them to explore.
Yeah, I'm curious because I've listened to them a little bit, and I generally like them, but they have a way different sound than Linkin Park, way different than the new metal
Emily
era.
Armstrong.
And Armstrong is what I was trying to think. And so I'm curious to see like how she'll step into the shoes of Chester Bennington, who's one
What
of the
an
greatest.
intimidating thing! Like,
So that's one where I was like, I would not ever compare the two. I would never say this was Chester's Linkin Park and this is her Linkin Park. I would say this is a different version of Linkin Park, because you get into that where like, yeah, she's never going to be the same. Their sound may never be the same. I think it's a new entity for them, would be my guess, and how I'm going to view them, because
True,
otherwise I'm going to be sad the whole time.
but they're also
Uh,
still probably going to perform previous songs. She's going to sing
yeah,
Chester's part, right? So how can you not compare them when you listen to it at some point, on some level,
yeah. I
well,
don't disagree, but I'm going to try and mentally separate them. Otherwise, I'll be big sad.
it's definitely an intimidating venture for Armstrong to cover an 18-year tenure of Chester Bennington, and it's such a well-known and well-recognized artist. So I can definitely appreciate what she's stepping up to do. That takes a brass pair to step up and do something like that. So, all right, guys. This has been a wonderful little foray into fan fiction and some tangentially related nerd verses. We never do just stick to one nerd verse on this show, so but I am going to take this moment, since you've listened to this far, to encourage you to please engage with our stuff. We are bound to the almighty demon lord algorithm. We need likes, we need comments, and I personally would very much like to hear your feedback in regards to fan fiction and the entire nerdverse surrounding that community, and what you think of it, and anything that we missed or didn't quite cover in this episode that you would like to see in future episodes. Additionally, if you liked what you listened to and want to hear us cover a particular topic, you can always shoot us a message on Facebook, on Instagram, on anywhere on our link tree, and we will take that into our guides. So, but with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. This has been a wonderful little foray of Crossing the Nerdverse. I'm glad you came with us, and we will see you next time.
How do you get confetti?
Bye.